This reflection will explore my linguistic practices, focusing on Burmese, my native language, and English, a language that I learned through formal education and incidental exposure. I will also examine how these experiences shaped my approach to teaching and influenced my classroom practices.
Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, is a linguistically diverse country located in Southeast Asia. With more than 135 different ethnic groups calling Myanmar as their home, each group has a unique language such as the Shan, Kachin, Kayin, or Rakhine languages and their respective dialects.
Burmese language, which belongs to the Sino-Tibetan language family, is the official language of Myanmar and is spoken by the majority Bamar ethnic group.
Burmese language is used in the government, education, and media. It is the common language or lingua franca among the various ethnic groups. Due to this diversity, multilingualism is common in Myanmar, particularly among ethnic minority communities. As Burmese is the dominant language, many people in Myanmar speak multiple languages, switching between them depending on the social context. However, Burmese varies slightly depending on the region, with differences in accent and vocabulary. For example, it's often possible to identify someone's region of origin just by their accent. I am from the central part of Myanmar, and the Burmese I speak reflects the characteristics of my region. While I don't speak any ethnic languages or dialects, the version of Burmese I use includes regional variations in pronunciation and vocabulary. For instance, what is commonly called yebo, which is a bucket in standard Burmese, might be tanchangbo in my region. And mola uni, which is carrot, might be known as kaja'u in my region. The Burmese language I refer to in this presentation reflects my regional variation.
I use only my regional Burmese variation in both formal and informal contexts, only switching to standard Burmese when there is a communication breakdown. It is because my regional variation of Burmese feels more natural, authentic to my identity, and more comfortable for me. Burmese is my native language, and I am fully fluent in it. It is a language that I have spoken since birth, and I use it for all forms of communication in my daily life. Burmese is the language I use to convey emotions, share ideas, and participate in both formal and informal interactions. Whether I am discussing everyday matters with my family, engaging in community events, or negotiate social norms, Burmese is the vehicle through which I communicate effectively. My acquisition of Burmese was a natural and immersive process. From the earliest stages of my life, Burmese was the language spoken at home, making it the first language that I learned. My parents, relatives, and community members all communicated in Burmese, providing me a rich linguistic environment that nurtured my language development. At school, Burmese continued to be the medium of instruction, reinforcing my language skills and deepening my understanding of cultural and social norms embedded in the language. The consistent use of Burmese in both my personal and academic life ensured that I become highly proficient in it. I learned to navigate different social registers, from the formal language used in educational settings to informal colloquial expressions common in everyday conversations. This immersion in a monolingual environment allowed me to develop a strong command of Burmese. In my daily life, Burmese is the language I use for almost all forms of communication. At home, I speak Burmese with my parents. The language choice reflects our shared cultural heritage and reinforces our familial bonds. In social settings such as community gatherings or social interactions with my friends, Burmese remains the default language. Its usage is not merely a matter of convenience, it is a deliberate choice that affirms my identity and belonging within the community. The ability to switch between different registers of Burmese from formal to informal allows me to navigate various social situations with ease. The primary function of Burmese in my life is to serve as the medium of inter- and intra-ethnic communication. this language through which I connect with my cultural roots, participate in traditional practices, and engage in community life. Burmese is not just a tool for communication, it is a symbol of cultural continuity and identity. Through Burmese, I can express culturally specific concepts, emotions, and values that might not have direct equivalents in other languages. This cultural depth makes Burmese an essential part of my personal and social identity. It also allows me to maintain strong connections with my community, where the shared language fosters a sense of belonging and mutual understanding. The use of Burmese in various domains of life, from personal to professional, highlights its central role in my linguistic repertoire. English, in contrast, is a language I acquired through a combination of formal education and incidental learning. My proficiency in English is high, as reflected in my achievement of an 8.0 overall band in the IELTS exam in 2023. However, my experience with English was markedly different, and the journey to the current level of proficiency was gradual and multifaceted. Unlike Burmese, which I acquired naturally through immersion in a native speaking environment, English required conscious effort and sustained practice. English was first introduced to me in school as a compulsory subject. The initial focus was on foundational aspects such as grammar, vocabulary, and sentence structure. However, my exposure to English extended beyond the classroom. As a child, I watched English language cartoons, which provided an early introduction to the sounds and rhythms of the language. As I grew older, my interest in English expanded to include movies and songs, which became significant sources of incidental learning. These media forms exposed me to authentic language use, idiomatic expressions, and cultural references that were not part of the formal curriculum. However, my engagement with English was not limited to passive consumption. When I decided to take the IELTS exam, I embarked on a period of intensive self-study. I focused on improving specific language skills such as academic writing and listening comprehension, which were crucial for achieving a high score. This combination of formal instruction, incidental learning, and targeted self-study contributed to my overall proficiency in English, which allows me to use the language effectively in both academic and social contexts.
English plays a more specialized role in my life. Although I don't use it in daily conversations, in certain situations it is essential. When communicating with my foreign friends, for example, I use English. In these circumstances, English acts as a common language that makes intercultural and linguistic communication easier. As it acts as a bridge to the global community, it provides access to a multitude of information and resources that would not otherwise be available. Furthermore, academic contexts favor the use of English, with many international courses using English as their medium of instruction.
My proficiency in English allows me to engage with academic content, participate in discussions, and access a broader range of information and resources. My experience with both Burmese and English have had a significant impact on my development as a language educator. The deep connection I have with Burmese has made me aware of the importance of respecting and valuing students' native languages in the classroom. Even in my professional life, despite being an English teacher, I rarely use English outside of formal occasions. Among colleagues who are also English teachers, Burmese remains the language of choice in informal and even many professional settings, such as regular meetings. Despite our roles as English teachers, our language does not yet feel like a natural extension of who we are. It functions more like a performance, something we switch on for specific moments, but switch off when we return to our comfort zones. This disconnection may contribute to the higher affective filter I observe in my students when I speak English in the classroom. They may feel the same tension as I do, a sense that English is foreign, not just linguistically, but emotionally, which makes them become tense and disengaged in the classroom. This could explain why they feel more relaxed and more engaged when I switch to Burmese.
I recognize that every student has a distinct linguistic and cultural background, which should be viewed as an asset rather than a barrier to learning. This understanding informs the way I teach as I work to foster a supportive environment that values linguistic diversity. For example, I encourage my students to adopt translanguaging practices and use their linguistic and cultural capital to improve learning. For example, when I am teaching idioms, I invite students to compare English idioms with those in their native languages, including Burmese, which leads to a rich discussion that highlights the diversity of expressions and cultural perspectives in the classroom.
This practice fosters a deeper understanding of language and culture and helps students appreciate the value of their own linguistic backgrounds. Furthermore, my journey with English has taught me the value of both formal instruction and incidental learning. For example, I use English language films with subtitles to expose students to authentic dialogue and cultural context, which is then followed by discussions that encourage them to apply what they have learned. I also share my own experiences of learning English, including the challenges I faced and the strategies I used to overcome them. By doing so, I aim to demystify the language learning process and empower students to take control of their own learning.
Furthermore, as I am aware of the difficulties involved in learning a second language, I can better relate to my students and adapt my instructions to meet their needs. The idea of linguistic self-respect, as put forth by Lee 2007, resonates deeply with me. I believe that recognizing and appreciating my linguistic repertoire allows me to provide my students with a more inclusive learning environment.
As I continue to develop as an educator, I will draw on these experiences to foster a sense of linguistic self-respect in my students, helping them to see their languages and cultures as valuable assets in their educational journey.